Attraction is a word that drifts through poems and conversations, that stirs something deep and often inexplicable in us. When we say someone is attractive, what are we truly responding to? Their eyes? Their voice? Their presence? Or is it something older, deeper, something written not in their words or gestures, but in their biology? Tonight, we begin with a quiet exploration of something that feels intensely personal and yet is, at its core, incredibly universal: human sexual chemistry. It's easy to believe that attraction is a conscious decision, that we notice someone, find them pleasing, and choose to engage. But the truth may be far more complicated and far more fascinating, because beneath the moment where our eyes meet another's across a room, biology has already been speaking in whispers, in pulses, in chemical signatures passed between bodies before a word is ever spoken. Let's begin at the surface, but know that we're about to fall down a rabbit hole that has no clear end. When two people meet, their brain immediately starts working behind the scenes. It begins releasing a carefully orchestrated cocktail of chemicals, neurotransmitters that light up pleasure centers, hormones that increase sensitivity, and biological cues that shift perception. One of the most powerful among these is dopamine, a molecule often referred to as the reward chemical. Dopamine spikes when we encounter something new, something exciting, something that hints at satisfaction. It's the same chemical released when we eat our favorite food, achieve a goal, or anticipate a pleasurable experience. In the context of attraction, it becomes the spark, the surge, the feeling that something important is beginning. But dopamine isn't alone. Enter oxytocin, sometimes called the cuddle hormone. This chemical plays a key role in emotional bonding and physical closeness. It's released during touch, during moments of intimacy, and it creates a sense of connection, of safety, of belonging. While dopamine ignites the flame, oxytocin feeds it. It says, stay, trust, connect. It's what makes a fleeting moment feel like it matters more than it should. And then, in the background, serotonin modulates mood, perception, desire. Interestingly, in the early stages of attraction, serotonin levels often drop, mimicking the chemical profile of someone experiencing obsessive thoughts. This may explain why, during the first stages of a crush, we can't stop thinking about the other person. They linger in our mind, like a song we didn't choose, looping again and again, quietly pulling us toward them. And yet, that's just the inside story. On the outside, another silent force is at play: pheromones. Though their role in human attraction is still debated in scientific circles, there's growing evidence that we emit and detect chemical signals that influence our interest in others. These invisible messengers carry subtle information about genetic compatibility, immune system variants, and biological readiness. Have you ever felt drawn to someone without knowing why, without even fully seeing or speaking to them? The answer may be encoded in scent or in something even less tangible: a trace, a signature, a call that resonates in the body before the mind can catch up. It's worth pausing here, because everything we've just discussed, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, pheromones, exists below the level of conscious thought. These are ancient systems, reptilian systems, designed not for romance, survival. They evolved over millennia, not to help us find our soulmates, but to ensure reproduction, to secure social bonds, to increase the odds that our species would continue. And yet, We experience them as love, as longing, as magic. Take a moment. Let that settle. When we look at someone and feel desire, we believe we're in control, that we've assessed their personality, their values, their appearance, and decided, yes, this is someone I want. But what if that choice is an illusion? What if the decision was made long before our minds caught up? What if it was biology that chose, and we are simply rationalizing a decision our body already made? The idea is both fascinating and unsettling. It challenges our sense of autonomy. It forces us to question the authenticity of our romantic instincts. Are we falling in love or falling into chemistry? Let's consider an example. Two strangers meet at a cafe. They talk, laugh. There's a spark, but behind the laughter, subtle exchanges are occurring. Their pupils dilate in response to interest. Their heart rates synchronize as the conversation deepens. They mirror each other's body language, a sign of emotional rapport. Touch is exchanged, a brush of the hand, gentle lean in. With every passing minute, oxytocin levels rise. Dopamine rewards each glance, each laugh, each shared moment. To them, it feels like something special, fated even. To biology, it's working as designed. This doesn't mean love isn't real, but it does mean love is layered. That beneath the poetry, there is a script, a deeply encoded one, written in molecules and signals we barely understand. And still, we must ask, can chemistry be trusted? Consider this. The same hormones that draw us together can blind us. They can override judgment. In early stages of attraction, the brain's rational centers actually become less active. The parts responsible for critical thinking and evaluating risks take a back seat, allowing us to idealize the other person, to focus on their good traits and ignore their flaws, to see them not as they are, but as we want them to be. That's the paradox. Chemistry, which feels like clarity, often creates illusion. And sometimes we don't realize this until the chemicals fade. Neuroscientists tell us that the intense neurochemical cocktail of early romantic attraction lasts, on average, between 6 months to 2 years. After that, the brain adapts. The flood of dopamine slows. The oxytocin bond either deepens or dissolves. At this stage, many relationships end, not because they were never real, but because they were never built on more than the initial spark. Others transition into something calmer, more stable, less about fireworks, and more about resonance. This too is chemical, just different chemicals. Endorphins, vasopressin, molecules of security rather than seduction. But let's return to the beginning. If we're not choosing who we're drawn to, if we're following an invisible biological current, then what does that say about free will? Are we puppets of our hormones, victims of our own neurotransmitters? Perhaps not, because while we may not choose the feeling of attraction, we do choose how to respond to it. We choose whether to pursue, whether to pause, whether to understand what's happening beneath the surface. In that space, between impulse and action, lies our agency, our power. And here's the other truth. Biology isn't destiny. It's a blueprint, not a mandate. Chemistry may guide us, but it doesn't define the shape of our relationships. It doesn't decide whether we nurture intimacy, build trust, communicate needs. Those things require consciousness, effort, vulnerability. And ironically, it's after the chemistry fades that love truly begins. Now take a breath. Let this sink in. The next time you feel a spark, notice what it feels like, but also ask what it means. Are you responding to their laugh, their presence, or to something deeper, something ancient, Maybe it's not just their eyes. Maybe it's pheromones. Maybe it's a subtle dance of oxytocin and dopamine. Maybe it's all of it. Entangled. We are not just minds. After all, we are bodies, systems, maps of desire, written long before we knew the word love. And yet, within that biological map, there is mystery. Because sometimes, despite everything we know about chemistry, someone comes along and moves us in ways we can't explain. They defy our patterns, our expectations, our preferences. They feel familiar, though we've never met. They calm our nervous system, or ignite something wild and terrifying. And in those moments, we must ask, is this chemistry? Is this destiny? Or is it something else entirely? As we drift away from this chapter, carry this with you, not as a conclusion, but as an opening, an invitation to question the forces that move us, to explore both the science and the soul of attraction. Take a final breath, because next, we step beyond biology, into the realm of what cannot be measured, into the strange, magnetic territory of soul ties. Some connections defy explanation. They don't follow the rules of time or reason. They stretch beyond memory, beyond physical presence, and they echo in the quiet spaces of our lives. These are not ordinary attachments. These are soul ties. To some, this may sound poetic or metaphysical. Others, it is a reality so deep and personal that it feels embedded into the marrow of who they are. A soul tie is more than infatuation, more than desire. It is a tether, almost invisible, formed not just through touch, but through emotional intensity, vulnerability, and spiritual alignment. We often hear about soulmates, twin flames, karmic bonds, but a soul tie is different. It doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require permanence. What it does require is emotional intimacy, a moment of recognition, a feeling that you're not simply meeting someone new, but remembering someone familiar. Soul ties are formed in many ways, through friendship that moves past surface, through shared trauma, through deep spiritual conversations, and most commonly, through sexual intimacy. Sex is not just physical. This has been said before, but it remains one of the most important truths to sit with. During sex, especially in vulnerable, emotionally charged moments, the body is open, but so is the soul. Hormones like oxytocin are released, creating powerful emotional bonds. The body, mind, and heart synchronized. Even if the intention was casual, the impact can be anything but. What starts as exploration can become entanglement. And suddenly, you find yourself tethered to someone long after they have physically left your life. Soul ties do not obey logic. They do not dissolve because someone walked away or because time passed. Instead, they settle deeper. You may find yourself thinking about this person without wanting to. You may dream of them. Their voice may echo in your inner world, uninvited but persistent. The heart searches for meaning, asking, why? Why can't I let go of them? Why do I still feel connected? The answer is often this: because something inside you opened when you were with them, something that hasn't closed. A piece of you recognized something in them, and in that recognition, a thread was woven. This is not always romantic. Sometimes it is painful. Sometimes the soul tie is with someone who harmed you, who manipulated you, who was not good for you. And yet, the bond remains, because it was formed in a moment of intensity. And the body doesn't always distinguish between love and longing, between chemistry and safety, between passion and possession. Pause for a moment. Reflect on that. Think of someone who is no longer in your life, but who for some reason is still in your heart. Maybe you don't speak. Maybe you haven't for years. Maybe they've moved on. Maybe you have too. And yet, they linger. That is a soul tie. And the hardest truth about soul ties is that they do not require consent. You can create one without intending to. You can be bound to someone who never deserved your closeness. You can feel haunted by someone who never really saw you. This can be especially true in relationships where intimacy was mixed with emotional pain, abuse, manipulation, control. All of these leave residue, and the soul, which longs for wholeness, will sometimes keep reaching for the person who broke it, hoping that the bond will eventually bring healing. But that is not always how it works. Some soul ties are not meant to be mended. They are meant to be acknowledged, felt fully, and then, with time and intention, released. But how do you release a soul tie? How do you untether yourself from someone who lives in your emotional body? You begin with truth, with naming it, with saying, this bond exists, this pain is real, this longing is not weakness. Then you bring that bond into the light. You speak to it, you write to it, you understand where it came from. You trace the path back to the moment it formed. What was happening in your life, in your heart, when this person entered it? What did they reflect to you? What did they offer, even if only briefly, that made your soul lean forward? Understanding does not erase connection, but it softens it. It gives you space to breathe again. And sometimes when you're ready, you must reclaim the parts of you that stayed with them. You can say, even silently, I call myself back. I release what is not mine to carry. I do not belong to you anymore. These words matter. Energy responds to intention, and your healing begins with your own voice. Not all soul ties are toxic. Some are beautiful. Some remain with us for life in quiet, loving ways. A friend who shaped your view of love. A first partner who saw you fully. A brief encounter that reminded you of your worth. These, too, are soul ties. And they do not need to be severed. Only honored. The danger lies in mistaking all intensity for importance. In believing that the person who left a mark must therefore be meant for you. That is not always true. Sometimes they came to teach you something. Sometimes they came to awaken something. Sometimes they came to show you where you were still fragmented. The lesson was the connection, not the permanence of the relationship. Why do some people haunt us long after they're gone? Because the soul remembers impact, not just duration. A single moment can imprint deeper than a decade. A brief kiss, a passing glance, a shared night under stars. It becomes a page in your inner book, one that you reread, not because you want to, but because it asks to be understood. Can a single moment bind two souls across time? Yes, but only if the moment was honest. Only if something in both hearts recognized the other. Soul ties cannot be forced. They are not created through manipulation. They are born through resonance, through recognition. And yet, even that resonance is not always right. Sometimes it is familiar because it mimics a past wound, a father who wasn't there, a mother who couldn't hold space, a childhood friend who left without saying goodbye. And so, when we meet someone who awakens those same echoes, our soul confuses recognition with destiny. It says, this must be love, when it's really, this feels familiar. That is why discernment is essential. Feeling deeply does not always mean loving wisely, and letting go does not mean the bond never mattered. It simply means you are choosing yourself. So tonight, as you lie in bed, as the world slows, listen for the names that still live inside you. The ones that make your chest tighten, the ones that bring softness, the ones that carry ache. Speak to them, not out loud, but in the quiet language of your inner world. Say, thank you. I release you. I remember, but I do not remain. And if the tie is too strong to sever tonight, that's okay. Healing is not an act. It is a journey. And soul ties, like roots, take time to pull from the ground. In our next chapter, we will explore what happens when these ties turn into patterns, when we begin to loop through emotional attachment, again and again, chasing the same feeling, the same bond, in different faces. Because sometimes it's not the person we're tied to, but the feeling we're addicted to. But for now, rest, reflect, and return to yourself. The soul always knows the way home. Why do we return to what hurts us? Why can't we let go, even when every part of us knows we should? It is a question whispered in late-night thoughts, tucked into conversations with friends, and written between the lines of broken love letters never sent. We ache, yet we circle back. We remember the pain, and yet we reach out again. Something inside us clings, not to the reality of the relationship, but to what we hoped it would become. This is not weakness. This is not foolishness. This is a loop of emotional attachment, a cycle written not just in our minds, but in our nervous systems, in the deepest folds of our earliest emotional memory. The truth is, brain does not always distinguish between love and intensity. It confuses emotional highs and lows with meaning, with depth, in relationships that swing between affection and withdrawal, between tenderness and tension. The body becomes trained to anticipate chaos. It begins to crave the unpredictable. It finds comfort in the very thing that causes it harm. This is not just poetic metaphor. This is neuroscience. When we fall into a toxic or inconsistent relationship, the brain's reward pathways light up in much the same way they do for substances like drugs or alcohol. The cycle of hope, followed by emotional withdrawal, followed by reward, creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. This kind of reward system is the most addictive of all. It teaches the brain to stay, to chase the high, endure the low, for the sake of the next moment of connection. And this is how we loop. We stay, even when we shouldn't. We rationalize. We romanticize. We remember the good moments and bury the bad. We tell ourselves they didn't mean it, or it was just a bad day, or if I love them enough, they will change. These thoughts are not delusions. They are the brain's desperate attempts to make sense of the cycle, to survive within it. Because leaving something that once felt like love is not just a physical act. It is an emotional unlearning. When you bond with someone through intense emotional experiences, whether joyful or painful, your body stores that connection. It holds it in muscle memory, in hormones, in familiar patterns. And because the body values familiarity over happiness, it may return to what is known, even when what is known is unhealthy. This is why you might miss someone who mistreated you, why you might feel lonely, even when you're finally free. The absence of chaos feels like emptiness. The absence of pain feels like silence. And silence, for someone used to noise, can feel unbearable. This is not your fault. It is your wiring. But wiring can be rewired. Pause for a moment. Let that settle. You are not broken. You are patterned. And patterns can be changed. But first, they must be seen. You must look at the loop directly. Where does it begin? What sets it off? Is it a certain phrase, a certain behavior, a certain memory? Do you reach out after they withdraw because you want peace? Do you apologize to keep the connection even when you weren't the one who caused the rupture? These are not just questions. They are mirrors. And the answers are not always easy, but they are always necessary. Some of us learned early that love was conditional, that attention had to be earned, that affection could be withdrawn without warning. And so, as adults, we gravitate toward what feels familiar, not because it is safe, but because it is known. And the known, even when painful, can feel like home. This is the foundation of the loop of emotional attachment. It is not about the person. It is about the pattern. It is about your nervous system reacting to something it remembers, even if your conscious mind doesn't. It is about the way your body holds on to what your logic tries to release. Let's go deeper. When does love stop being a choice and become a compulsion? It happens slowly, subtly. It begins with a moment of joy, of closeness, of feeling seen. Then it is followed by distance, by coldness, by confusion. And because the good felt so good, you chase it. You want it back. And you believe the only way to get it is to stay, to try harder, to give more, to lose pieces of yourself in exchange for temporary connection. This is not love. This is emotional dependency. And dependency masquerades as love so convincingly that it can take years to tell the difference. Real love does not feel like withdrawal. It does not demand that you beg for affection. It does not make you feel small or anxious or unworthy. Real love is steady. It is consistent. It may not always be exciting, but it is always safe. The loop, however, feeds on excitement, on longing, on the thrill of reunion after distance. It creates the illusion of passion. But passion that comes from pain is not love. It is trauma reenacted. Take another breath. Let that truth move through you. To step out of the loop is to step into discomfort, into stillness, into the unfamiliar. It is to sit with the ache of loneliness without trying to fix it with another person. It is to feel the emptiness and not run from it. To recognize that the craving is not for the person, but for the emotional high they gave you. And that craving will pass. Slowly, uncomfortably, but it will pass. Healing begins with honesty, with admitting, this hurts, but I keep choosing it. With acknowledging, I am afraid to be alone, but I deserve more than this. With remembering, love should not cost me my peace. This is not easy. You may leave and return 100 times. You may feel weak, but every time you choose yourself, you strengthen the muscle of worth. Every time you stay away, you rewire the pathways in your brain that told you this was love. You begin to learn what love actually is. You begin to crave peace over passion, consistency over chaos, presence over performance, and eventually, you stop looping. You stop chasing. You stop shrinking to fit into someone else's version of love. You return to yourself. As we prepare to move forward, breathe. Feel the weight of this awareness. Let it soften you. Let it open you. In the next chapter, we will revisit the roots of these patterns. We will go back to the beginning, to the early emotional codes written during puberty, to the first times we felt wanted, to the first times we felt rejected. Because in those moments, the blueprint was formed. And to change the loop, we must understand the original design. But for now, be still. You are not your patterns. You are the awareness that sees them, and that is where healing begins. There is a silence before the storm, a stillness before everything shifts. Puberty arrives like that, quiet at first, then sudden, then all-consuming. It does not ask permission. It reclaims the body like a wave, crashing over a forgotten shoreline, reshaping everything in its path. The way we see ourselves, the way we feel others, the way we belong or don't. And in the background, something deeper begins to stir. Just hormones, not just biology, but something older and quieter. The beginning of emotional coding. The first stirrings of desire are not loud. They rise slowly, subtly, like breath in the chest. One day, the world is flat. The next, someone walks past, and your body lights up in places you didn't know could feel. A voice makes your stomach flutter. A look makes your skin buzz. You don't know what it means. You only know that something has begun. This is where it all starts. Not just attraction, but attachment. During puberty, our brains are flooded with hormonal messengers. Testosterone, estrogen, dopamine, oxytocin. These aren't just reproductive switches. They are emotional architects. They shape the scaffolding of how we connect, what we crave, what we chase, and what we fear. The adolescent brain is still developing. Its architecture raw and sensitive. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for regulation and foresight, is still under construction. Meanwhile, the limbic system, our emotional core, is wide awake. This imbalance makes puberty a time of heightened sensitivity. Every emotion feels magnified. Every interaction feels like a message. Every glance is read as a signal. And in this vulnerable state, our early emotional environment begins to write itself into the way we attach. Who showed us love when we were young? Who didn't? Who made us feel seen? Who made us feel small? These questions aren't always answered in words. They're answered in patterns. They're answered in the nervous system. They're answered in the first relationships we form when hormones are loud, when the self is unsure, when the heart is hungry and unprotected. This is emotional coding. And like any code, it runs silently beneath the surface. It doesn't shout its name. It doesn't announce its presence. It just becomes the map. And long after we leave adolescence, that map continues to guide us. You might not remember the first time someone made you feel desirable, but your body does. You might not remember the first time someone ignored your vulnerability, but your emotional system does. These early experiences imprint us. They create the templates that, unless we become aware of them, become the scripts we follow again and again in adulthood. Perhaps this is why we are drawn to what is familiar, even when it hurts. Because what is familiar feels like home, even when that home was unkind. And so, we chase unavailable partners if love was inconsistent growing up. We overextend ourselves if we learn that love had to be earned. We push people away if closeness once felt dangerous. The desire we feel as adults is often not fresh. It is the echo of teenage longing, replaying itself in new bodies, new faces, new timelines. What if who we're drawn to is just a ghost of our past emotional environment? What if attraction is not always about the present moment, but about recognition, not of the person in front of us, but of the feeling they recreate within us? This is the haunting truth of emotional coding, that we are not always choosing from the now. Sometimes we are choosing from the then. A teenage girl who grows up craving affection might find herself drawn to emotionally distant partners, trying again and again to win a kind of love she never received. A teenage boy who learned that vulnerability was weakness may pursue conquest instead of connection, mistaking validation for intimacy. And neither of them may know why their relationships keep repeating the same painful patterns. The emotional brain during puberty does not forget. It stores the emotions of early relationships with intensity. The joy of first love, the sting of rejection, the ache of unreturned affection. These become emotional markers. And when something later in life feels similar, the brain fires those same pathways. It says, I know this. It feels like chemistry. It feels like fate. But it may simply be familiarity. This is not destiny. It is design. And design can be rewritten, but only with awareness. Puberty is also the place where independence and desire begin to tangle. We are told we are becoming adults, that we must make our own choices. But the choices we make are deeply influenced by unspoken needs. To be seen, be wanted, to matter. And when we don't know how to ask for those things directly, we ask for them through sex, through approval, through performance. Teenagers often explore relationships without knowing what they truly want, because desire has awoken before clarity has formed. This mismatch can lead to experiences that confuse or even harm. A first kiss that felt too fast, a first relationship that became controlling, a moment of intimacy that left an emotional bruise. And all of these moments, no matter how small, become part of the emotional landscape. They teach us what to expect, what to fear, what to chase. This is why teenage years are so formative, not just because they are the beginning of sexual identity, but because they are the beginning of our emotional blueprint. We carry these blueprints into adulthood, often without question. We think our preferences are personal. Many of them are patterned, and unless we slow down and ask where those patterns began, we risk replaying them indefinitely. If you have ever wondered why you love the way you do, why certain people magnetize you, why others make you recoil, look back, not with blame, not with regret, but with curiosity. What were you told love looked like? What were you shown? What did your body learn in those early electric years when everything felt urgent and nothing made sense? The answers live there. In the rooms where you first felt invisible, in the spaces where you first learned to perform, in the words that were said to you when you first opened yourself and were not met with tenderness. These memories are not to be feared. They are to be understood, because only through understanding can we shift. Only through awareness can we begin to choose, not from old wounds, but from present truth. This is the gift of revisiting puberty, not as a biological event, but as an emotional origin. It is the opportunity to rewrite the map, to say, I no longer need to chase the feeling of being chosen. I choose myself. I no longer need to replay the ache of being overlooked. I see myself. I no longer need to give my body to be loved. I am already worthy. As we move forward, we step into the next paradox, the danger of teenage sex and the illusion of emotional control. Because when we begin to act on the desires born in puberty, without the emotional tools to carry them, we often confuse freedom with readiness. And the cost of that confusion can be great. But for now, pause. Let this truth rest in your chest. You are not broken for the ways you loved when you didn't yet know how. You were learning. You are still learning. And your heart is allowed to grow beyond its early architecture. Take a breath. We will go deeper from here. There's a strange intersection that lives within adolescence, one where curiosity, freedom, and risk seem to rise together, colliding like waves against the shoreline of the self. It's a time of awakening, of identity forming in shadows and light, of learning what it means to feel deeply, to want something without fully knowing why. And at the center of this turbulence sits one of the most misunderstood and emotionally fragile phenomena of youth: teenage sex. We rarely speak of it plainly. We warn about it. We dramatize it. We silence it. But we seldom hold space for the reality of it, for how it feels inside a young body that is growing faster than its heart can understand. Inside a mind still learning how to separate impulse from truth. This chapter is not about condemnation. It is not about judgment. It is about understanding. Because only through quiet understanding can we begin to untangle the emotional chaos so many carry long after their youth has passed. Teenage sex is not dangerous because of the act itself. It is dangerous because of the emotional weight it places on a nervous system that is not yet built to bear it. The teenage brain, still forming, is a strange and miraculous thing. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation, is still under construction well into our mid-20s. Meanwhile, the limbic system, the emotional center, is already fully alive and highly reactive. What this means is that adolescents are capable of feeling intensely, but not always capable of managing those feelings or making decisions grounded in long-term perspective. So when a teenager experiences sex, they're not just navigating physical sensation. They're stepping into an emotional storm they might not be equipped to weather. The chemicals released during sex, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, are powerful. They create bonds. They spark pleasure. They encode memory. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, is particularly potent in young people who are neurologically primed for attachment. Once release it, it tells the brain, you are safe here. You belong here. But what happens when that feeling is attached to someone who doesn't stay? Or worse, someone who never saw the act as anything meaningful in the first place? This is where premature bonding begins. A teenager may find themselves emotionally anchored to someone who doesn't reciprocate, and they may not understand why the detachment feels like loss, even heartbreak. They may replay the moment, wondering what they did wrong, unaware that what they are experiencing is not failure, but biology. Their brain created a tie their heart hadn't yet chosen, and in some cases, their heart may have been coerced, pressured, manipulated, or simply unready. And then, for others, the opposite reaction takes root. Instead of premature bonding, they develop emotional detachment. The experience was too painful, too confusing, too fast, so they begin to numb. They convince themselves it meant nothing. They build distance between their bodies and their feelings. Sex becomes disconnected from emotion, and intimacy becomes something to be feared, avoided, or used for control. This defense, while protective in the short term, can create long-term struggles with vulnerability, trust, and self-worth. We must ask, what are teenagers really giving away when they give themselves too early? It is not just virginity. That word, often wielded as a moral weapon, misses the point. What they are often giving away is emotional clarity, a sense of choice, the ability to say, I know who I am and I know what I want, rather than, I hope this makes me feel loved. Many teenagers enter sexual situations hoping to feel seen, to feel chosen. But sex that is given from a place of fear of losing someone, fear of not being enough, fear of missing out, is not sex chosen freely. It is a transaction of insecurity, not intimacy. And these early experiences shape the internal narrative that I must give something away in order to be kept. That desire is dangerous. That closeness always ends in pain. And sometimes it does. The aftermath of teenage sex can be heartbreakingly quiet. A change in how one sees themselves. A feeling of regret that lives like a whisper. An emotional scar that does not surface until years later. In adult relationships, in patterns that repeat without explanation. A fear of being touched, a fear of not being wanted, a fear that connection is always temporary. This isn't always the case. Some teenagers explore sex with awareness, with communication, with mutual care. But many do not. Many walk into it with only half the information and none of the emotional tools. And when we fail to prepare them, not just physically, but emotionally, we leave them vulnerable to wounds they can't even name yet. There's another layer: control. As teenagers mature, they begin to crave it. Not just the freedom to make choices, but the power to shape their own identities. Sex becomes one of the arenas where control appears attainable. For some, it's a way to feel grown up, to prove something to themselves or to others. For others, it becomes a bargaining chip, a way to keep someone close, to gain approval, to exercise power in a world where they often feel powerless. But control can be an illusion, because sex, at its core, opens the self. It exposes vulnerability, and no matter how carefully you script it, you cannot always predict how it will make you feel. You cannot control the chemical reactions, the emotional aftermath, or the behavior of the other person. Control then becomes a mask worn over fear, and fear, when left unspoken, becomes shame. So what happens next? Often, nothing. No one talks about it. The teenager moves on, pretends it didn't matter, laughs it off. But inside, a story is forming. A story about who they are, about what they're worth, about how much of themselves they must give away in order to be loved. And that story doesn't stay in adolescence. It follows them into college, into adulthood, into marriages, into nights when they wonder why they feel empty, even in someone else's arms, into relationships where they give too much or avoid feeling altogether. If we want to break this cycle, we must speak into the silence. We must teach teenagers that sex is not just physical. It is emotional, psychological, chemical, spiritual. It is never just about the body. And readiness isn't just about wanting to, or being curious, or saying yes. It's about knowing why, about understanding the potential outcomes, and feeling safe enough to face them. And if it's already happened, if someone gave themselves too soon, or from the wrong place, it doesn't mean they are damaged. It doesn't mean they are unworthy. It means they were human. It means they were learning. It means they are still worthy of love that asks for nothing but presence. Control, real control, comes not from giving or withholding sex. It comes from knowing yourself deeply enough to choose. Not from fear, not from pressure, but from truth. And that kind of control cannot be rushed. It must be grown through time, through experience, through kindness. As we mature, we often try to create systems of control around love and intimacy. We build rules, we draw lines, we protect ourselves with distance. We believe that if we manage the terms, we won't get hurt. But love isn't a transaction, and neither is sex. The next paradox will explore that illusion, that we can ever control the chaos of connection without first confronting the chaos within ourselves. But for now, rest in this truth. You are not your past. You are not your choices. You are not your fear. You are still whole, still sacred, still worthy of a love that waits for your readiness and honors your no as much as your yes. Take a breath. We will go deeper from here. We try to control love. We draw lines. We build walls. We calculate risk. We tell ourselves we will only go so far, that we will not repeat the past, that we will not be the one who loves more, gives more, breaks first. We try to predict the outcome, plan the feelings, manage the depth. But love does not care about our defenses. It does not thrive inside strategy. It resists logic. It blooms in chaos. This is the paradox of control in love. The more we try to manage it, the more it slips through our fingers. The more we protect our hearts from breaking, the less we allow them to open. The more we try to make love a safe transaction, the less room we give it to become real. We live in a world that praises emotional independence. We are told to be strong, self-sufficient, unshakable. We fear dependency. We fear needing someone because needing feels like weakness, and weakness feels like danger. So we become masters of self-protection. We become skilled at withholding. We offer just enough to stay connected, not enough to be hurt. But the truth is, love is not safe. Not in the way we want it to be. Love requires surrender. Not surrender to the other person, but surrender to the unknown, to the uncontrollable, to the parts of ourselves we cannot predict when we begin to feel. When you fall in love, something ancient wakes up, something that does not speak in language, but in instinct. The nervous system lights up, the heart begins to anticipate, the mind begins to hope, and suddenly, there is something at stake. Suddenly, someone else matters in a way that feels terrifying. To protect ourselves, we try to hold back. We analyze their every word. We test them. We hide pieces of ourselves to see if they will notice. We make rules. I won't say it first. I won't stay too long. I won't feel more than they do. But love doesn't bloom in the presence of rules. It blooms in the space where walls fall down, where we say, "Here I am. I don't know how this ends, but I want to be seen anyway." For the guarded heart, this is terrifying, because vulnerability is not natural for everyone. For many, it is a learned practice, a slow unlearning of years of self-reliance, trauma, disappointment. Some of us were taught early on that openness leads to pain, that love means sacrifice, that being known means being used. So we keep love at arm's length. We entertain connection, but not intimacy. We engage, but we do not reveal. We love in theory, but not in practice. We want to be chosen, but not exposed. And yet, we still long, because even the most defended heart still wants to be touched, still wants to be understood, still wants to be held in the places no one else has seen. So we find ourselves in the middle of the paradox. We want closeness, but we fear the cost. We crave connection, but we fear the surrender it demands. We say we want love, but we sabotage the very conditions that allow it to grow. The more we control, the less we feel. The more we protect, the less we receive. The more we try to guarantee safety, the more we lose the magic that comes from the unpredictable beauty of emotional intimacy. Can you ever truly be safe in love without losing part of your soul to it? Maybe not. Maybe love will always ask for some kind of risk. Maybe that's the price of something real. Not recklessness, but willingness. Not self-erasure, but exposure. Love asks us to sit in uncertainty, to hold space for the unknown, to care without a contract, to give without assurance. And that is a radical act, because love is not a shield. It is a mirror. It shows us who we are in the presence of another. It reveals our triggers, our fears, our softest wounds. And if we allow it, it can become the space where those wounds are healed. But not if we are always bracing for impact. When we try to control love, we are not really protecting ourselves from others. We are protecting ourselves from the feelings we believe we cannot survive. Rejection, abandonment, disappointment. But those feelings, while painful, are not fatal. They are part of the human experience. And the more we allow ourselves to feel them, the less power they have over us. To be loved is to be seen in our most unguarded state. And that is a terrifying proposition if we have lived most of our lives hiding. If we have curated our personalities, our behavior, our appearance, all to avoid the very vulnerability that love requires. So what do? We begin by noticing. Where do we pull back when something real starts to form? Where do we deflect affection? Where do we criticize or analyze to avoid feeling? And then we ask, what am I afraid of? Not just losing them, but losing myself, losing control, losing the version of me I have built to survive. This is where the work begins. In recognizing that control is often a trauma response, a way of navigating the world that once kept us safe, but what kept us safe may now be keeping us stuck. You cannot feel fully while guarding constantly. You cannot receive deeply while calculating endlessly. You cannot hold love and fear in the same hand and expect one to outweigh the other. Love is not predictable. It is not fair. It does not guarantee anything, but it offers something that control never can. Intimacy. Real, soul-deep intimacy. And yes, that intimacy will cost you. It may cost your pride. It may cost your image. It may cost your emotional detachment. But what it gives in return is worth it. Not always easy, but deeply, profoundly worth it. Because what if love isn't supposed to be something you survive? What if it is meant to be something you surrender to? What if the goal is not to remain untouched, but to be transformed? As we prepare to slow down and move into emotional memory, we must ask, what moments first taught us to protect instead of open? What experiences convinced us that control was safer than closeness? Because the next chapter isn't just about behavior, it's about memory. About the first time your heart broke and you swore it never would again. About the times you reached out and no one reached back. About the quiet vows you made to never feel that helpless again. But maybe helplessness isn't the enemy. Maybe it is part of the holy mess of being human. And maybe, just maybe, love is not about control at all. Maybe it's about surrendering, gently, to the chaos of being fully alive. Take a breath. We are going back to the beginning. First love marks us. Not always loudly. Not always with fanfare. Sometimes it doesn't even last long. Sometimes it never really began at all. Not fully, not clearly. Even so, it leaves its fingerprint on the soul. A quiet, permanent mark. Long after the relationship ends, the imprint remains. Not in the mind, necessarily. The details might fade. The dates, the places, the names of songs shared. But the emotional memory endures. The feeling of being chosen. The first time your heart accelerated in someone else's presence. The first time you were willing to risk rejection to feel something real. That's what stays. Neurologically, the imprint of first love runs deep. The adolescent brain, in its earliest encounters with romantic connection, lights up in a way that is uniquely intense. The chemicals released dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, create bonds that are experienced not just emotionally, but physically. These bonds wire together thoughts, feelings, desires, and sensations. The brain learns this is what love feels like. The problem is, the first experience isn't always healthy. It isn't always safe. It isn't always reciprocal, but it becomes the template. And so we go looking for it again. Not for the person necessarily, but for the feeling, that rush, that hope, that dizzy, aching, breathless pull that seemed to suspend time. We call it chemistry. We call it connection. It might just be recognition. The nervous system remembering something it once knew and calling it home. What does it mean to carry the imprint of first love into all that comes after? It means that sometimes we don't see the person in front of us for who they are. We see them through a lens, tinted by nostalgia, blurred by comparison. We chase ghosts, not people. We react to echoes, not realities. First love, especially if unresolved, can become a kind of emotional haunting. If it ended with heartbreak, we may spend years trying to rewrite that ending, trying to prove we are lovable, trying to make someone else stay. So the original loss feels less defining. If first love was mutual and magical, we may try to recreate the fantasy. We hold each new partner up to an impossible standard, not because they aren't enough, but because they aren't that first rush of awakening, the pure, unfiltered innocence of loving without fear. And if first love was never fully realized, a crush, a missed chance, a love that never quite took root, we may become stuck in possibility, forever wondering what could have been, idealizing the dream instead of facing the truth of the present. These patterns are not conscious. They are imprinted. They live in the unconscious mind, in the body's memory, in the reflexes we don't question. When we find someone new, the imprint stirs. It asks, do they feel like the first? Do they make me feel wanted in that same way? Am I chasing them? Or am I chasing something I lost? It's not always easy to know, because we are not just looking for love. We are looking for ourselves. And often, our first experience with love was also our first experience with emotional exposure, identity formation, self-reflection. Who we were in that first love. Awkward, honest, afraid, open, becomes a reference point. Sometimes it becomes a longing, a hunger to return to that version of us. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real, untouched by cynicism, unhardened by experience. But time does not go backward. And love, to be real now, must be rooted in the present. The imprint can inform, but it cannot lead. There is danger in chasing the past, in expecting a new love to heal the wound of a former one, in using someone else to recreate a scene we can't stop replaying. Because the truth is, no one can love you like your first love did. Not because they were better, but because they were first. And firsts are sacred, but they are not standards. So how do we honor the imprint without letting it define us? We start by remembering the person we were in that moment. What did we need? What did we learn? What did we lose? What did we gain? We reflect on the story not to relive it, but to understand how it shaped us. And then we ask ourselves, am I loving this person now? Or am I trying to relive a feeling I once knew? If the answer is the latter, we pause. We breathe. We bring our awareness back into the body, back into the moment. Because love cannot grow in the past. It only lives in the now. Some people live trapped in that first imprint forever. They measure all love by it. They wait to feel the exact same thing. And if they don't, they walk away. Not because the connection isn't real, but because it's different. And different feels like less, even when it could be more. Others run from it. First love hurt, so they harden. They build walls. They never let themselves feel that deeply again. And in doing so, they protect themselves from pain, but also from joy. There is another way, a softer way, a path that honors the imprint, thanks it, and releases it. A way of saying, you taught me something, but I no longer need you to define me. The person who first touched your heart was important, but they were not your destination. They were your beginning. Let them be that. As we continue, let's move into the mirror, the one we hold up to every lover, the one that shows us not just who they are, but who we want to become. Because attraction is not always about the other. Sometimes it is about the version of ourselves we believe we could be, if only we were loved in just the right way. Take a breath. The mirror is waiting. Sometimes the people we fall for are not who they appear to be. Or rather, they are not just themselves. They are also mirrors, reflecting not what we consciously look for, but what lives beneath our awareness, what we've forgotten, what we've hidden, what we never learned how to love in ourselves. This is the mirror effect in attraction. It is the quiet force behind some of our deepest longings and most magnetic connections. It doesn't ask for logic. It doesn't obey our carefully curated lists of what we think we want. Instead, it works in shadows. It whispers from the past. It beckons from the place where the self is still incomplete. Sometimes we are drawn to what we're missing. Other times, we are drawn to what we are denying. And that attraction is not always gentle. It can feel overwhelming, irrational, even painful. We feel pulled towards someone not because they are a perfect match, but because they carry a piece of our story, a piece we haven't yet claimed. This is why some relationships feel like home and fire at the same time. They stir something. They provoke. They press on wounds we thought were healed. They activate old scripts of unworthiness, of longing, of trying to earn love we were never freely given. And we think it's about them, but often it's not. We often attract people who reflect hidden parts of ourselves, parts we're still trying to integrate. The partner who doesn't communicate may reflect our own fear of being fully seen. The person who seems emotionally unavailable might mirror our fear of intimacy. The one who overwhelms us with intensity might be reflecting our own hunger for connection that we've long repressed. It doesn't mean they are wrong for us. It doesn't mean the relationship is doomed. But it does mean we are being invited to wake up, to look inward, to ask deeper questions. Is this chemistry or is this familiarity? Do I love this person or do I love who I become when I'm around them? Do I feel safe here or am I addicted to the emotional high and low they create? The mirror effect is not inherently toxic. It can be a catalyst for deep healing. When we are conscious of it, we can use it. We can say, this person is triggering something in me. What is it? We can notice when we start to abandon ourselves to stay close to someone. We can observe when we start to shrink or perform or chase. And we can pause, not to run away, but to reclaim the part of ourselves that got lost in the reflection. Love, when viewed through this lens, becomes a journey of self-discovery. Not selfish, not self-absorbed, but self-aware. Because how can we truly love another if we are only using them to find the pieces of ourselves we haven't yet embraced? There is a difference between compliment and compensation. A partner can compliment you, support your growth, reflect your values, deepen your sense of joy. But when you seek a partner to compensate for something you lack within yourself, The relationship becomes a mirror you try to climb through, hoping to find wholeness on the other side. And here's the painful truth. No one can give you what you refuse to give yourself. If you cannot sit with your own shame, no partner's praise will be enough. If you have not forgiven your past, no love will make the pain disappear. If you are disconnected from your desires, no amount of intimacy will fill that void. Attraction becomes a mirror, not only for the parts of ourselves we want to heal, but also for the qualities we have yet to embody. Sometimes we fall for the confident one because we deny our own power. Sometimes we chase the emotionally expressive person because we have silenced our own emotions. Sometimes we love the wild one because we've caged our inner fire for far too long. So the question becomes, is this person here to stay or simply to awaken something in me? And either answer can be sacred. Not all love is meant to last, but all love can teach. And the most profound loves are often the ones that reflect us back to ourselves with painful clarity. The beauty of the mirror effect is that it doesn't just reveal what is broken, it also shows what is possible. It shows you your strength in the way someone leans on you. It shows you your depth in the way someone sees into you. It shows you your courage in the way you show up for love, even when afraid. So, is love really about the other person? Or is it about self-discovery in disguise? Maybe it's both. Maybe we love others because we want to understand ourselves. Maybe we open our hearts to another because it is the only way to hear what our own heart has been saying all along. The mirror only hurts when we expect it to be a window, when we forget that what we see in another is often what we are being called to witness within, when we mistake reflection for reality. But when we accept the mirror for what it is, a tool, a teacher, a moment of revelation, then even the most difficult love can become a turning point. So take a moment to remember those who have stirred something deep in you. Not just the ones who stayed, especially the ones who didn't. The ones who cracked something open. The ones who made you feel more alive than you thought possible, even if they also left you aching. Thank them. Not because the pain was necessary, but because the reflection was honest. The mirror is always there, in the eyes of another, in the ache of longing, in the way we chase, or freeze, or disappear. And each time we look into it, we get to decide, will I lose myself in this image, or will I use it to find myself more clearly? Let's shift now from the noise of connection to the eerie stillness of emotional silence, to what happens when someone leaves, not with closure, but with absence, when a soul tie dissolves, but its echo remains. Because sometimes the mirror does not appear in the presence of someone. Sometimes it lives in their disappearance. Not every ending ends. Some endings don't come with closure. They come with silence, a pause that never resumes, a sentence without punctuation, a door that stays open, if only in the mind. Emotional ghosting is not just the absence of someone. It is the echo of their presence. It is the unfinished chord, the note that hangs in the air long after the music has stopped. They disappear, but they do not leave. Not completely. Their memory lingers in the nervous system, in the places they once touched, not just on your skin, but in your thoughts, your habits, your dreams. Ghosting does not simply end a relationship. It rewrites your sense of narrative. Suddenly, the story you were part of is gone. No conclusion, no clarity, just blank space. And in that space, the mind begins to fill in the gaps. It questions, it replays, it loops. Not because you are weak, but because the brain craves resolution. The nervous system, especially when activated by attachment, looks for completion. It wants to make sense of what no longer makes contact. And yet, nothing comes. No message, no explanation, just silence. The body may try to forget, but the nervous system remembers. It remembers the patterns, the sound of their voice, the weight of their attention, the rhythm of communication. It notices the shift, even when you pretend not to. It recognizes the withdrawal, the change in tone, the growing space between replies. And when the absence becomes permanent, it grieves, but in confusion, not in peace. To be ghosted is to be emotionally abandoned without acknowledgement. It is to be erased without warning. It is to be left holding a story that no longer has a co-author. And what remains is not just sadness. It is uncertainty, a question with no answer, a loop with no exit. This is why ghosting leaves such deep marks, because it interrupts not just connection, but coherence. You can process rejection when it is named. You can feel hurt and begin to heal when you understand what happened. When there is no goodbye, no final word, no confrontation, just a sudden vanishing, your healing gets suspended. It stays unfinished, waiting for a reply that never comes. But healing does not wait forever. Eventually, something in you begins to adapt, not by forgetting, but by surviving. You learn to live around the space they left. You carry it like a phantom limb. At times it stings. At times it fades. And at times it surprises you. How quickly you remember the shape of someone who is no longer here. Can we ever truly unlove someone? Or do we simply learn how to function without them? Love, especially when it was real, does not vanish on command. It doesn't dissolve with distance. It morphs. It retreats. It changes form. Sometimes it becomes longing. Sometimes it becomes resentment. Sometimes it becomes a quiet tenderness. You no longer speak aloud. Unloving is not an event. It is a process. It is the slow retraction of energy, the reclaiming of your emotional field, the unwinding of the threads that once tied you to them. But those threads don't always unravel cleanly. Some of them remain, not as active bonds, but as echoes, as ghosts. They show up in moments you least expect, in a scent, a song, a glance from someone else that feels familiar. And that is okay. It does not mean you are stuck. It means you are human. The ache that remains after ghosting is not just about the person. It is about the story you never got to finish, the closure you had to create on your own, the grief you had to hold without ceremony. Because to grieve someone who is still alive, but absent, is its own kind of death. Death without funeral, a loss without language. But even so, you learn. You learn to trust your version of events, even without their validation. You learn to accept the silence, not as punishment, but as proof. Proof of their inability to face the depth they awakened in you. Proof of your capacity to feel, even when the other could not. Emotional ghosting teaches you how to sit with emptiness, how to find meaning in unfinished spaces, how to hold your own story when no one else stays to hear it. And eventually, you become the closure you were waiting for. There are attachments that linger, because you want them to, but because they became woven into the architecture of your emotions. Detaching from them isn't just about forgetting. It's about rewriting, repatterning. It's about asking yourself, who am I now that they're gone? What did I learn? What part of me still aches to be seen? Not by them, but by me. Because lingering attachments often reveal unacknowledged needs. Needs we projected onto the other person. We thought they would meet them. We hoped they would stay long enough to soothe them. But now, in their absence, we must turn inward. We must become the presence we never received. This is where healing begins. Not when they come back, not when they explain, but when you stop needing their explanation to feel whole. It doesn't happen all at once. Some days you feel free, some days you feel raw, some days you don't feel anything at all. And then one day, you notice the silence no longer hurts. It just is. The ghost becomes quieter. The attachment fades. Not because you forced it, but because you chose to return to yourself. That is the secret. The way out of ghosting's grip is not confrontation. It is not revenge. It is not even understanding. It is self-reclamation. You gather the parts of you that were left hanging. You soothe the parts that felt abandoned. You love the version of yourself that kept waiting by the door. And you close it. Not with bitterness, but with grace. Not every ending ends with words. Some end with silence. But that silence, once accepted, can become sacred. It can teach you what you value, what you need, what you deserve. And most of all, it teaches you this. Your worth does not depend on someone else's ability to recognize it. You were never ghosted because you were unlovable. You were ghosted because they could not meet your depth. Take one last breath with that. Let's now float gently into the final paradox. The tension between fusion and freedom. Between losing ourselves in love and learning how to stay sovereign within it. Because after the silence, after the echo fades, we ask the question that shapes every future bond. How do I stay connected without disappearing? The final paradox of love may be the one that haunts us most. How to merge without disappearing. How to belong to another without betraying ourselves. This is the fusion freedom dilemma. A quiet, persistent tension woven into every intimate relationship. We long to be seen, to be held, to be understood. Yet we also long to remain sovereign, to stay connected to our own voice, to protect the delicate architecture of who we are when no one else is watching. Love asks us to soften, to open, to intertwine. But the soul, the psyche, the individual self, they all whisper, "Do not lose me." This tension begins early. Even as children, we swing between the need for closeness and the impulse for independence. We reach for our parents, then push them away. We cling, then retreat. As adults, this dance doesn't stop. In romantic love, it intensifies, because now the stakes are higher. Now it is not just about attachment, it is about identity. When we love someone deeply, something inside us wants to dissolve, not to vanish, but to merge. We want to feel the safety of unity, the comfort of not being alone. We crave the feeling that someone else gets us entirely, holds us fully, and remains with us, regardless of who we are, in each moment. That kind of intimacy is rare, it is sacred, and it is terrifying, because to be that close is to risk everything. To be that known is to stand naked, not in body, but in spirit, and to remain whole in that space, to not lose your boundaries, your truth, your needs, is one of the hardest acts of emotional courage there is. We are conditioned to think that love is about giving, about sacrificing, about pouring ourselves into another until they are full, even if it leaves us empty. But real love does not ask for erosion. It asks for expansion. It asks, can you be fully you and still let someone in? Can you open your world without abandoning it? Can you share your life without shrinking it? The fusion freedom dilemma shows up in small moments. When you pause before speaking your truth because you're afraid it will push them away. When you ignore a need because it might feel inconvenient. When you begin to edit yourself bit by bit to fit better into their world. It happens slowly, almost imperceptibly. And then one day you realize You're still in love, but you don't quite recognize yourself anymore. To love deeply and remain whole is not a contradiction, but it is a discipline. It requires awareness. It requires that we ask ourselves regularly, am I still in alignment with who I am? Or have I become a version of myself designed only to keep the connection alive? True connection should never cost you your center, and solitude should not be the price you pay to stay close to someone. We are not meant to fuse completely. We are not designed to become halves of a whole. We are whole beings, choosing each other again and again, not out of need, but out of resonance. Not because we are incomplete, but because love is better when it's shared. But sharing does not mean dissolving. Sharing means offering. Offering your truth, your time, your presence, your yes, and your no. Love that cannot hold your boundaries is not love. It is hunger, and hunger will consume whatever it touches. Perhaps the truest love is one that honors both togetherness and solitude. One that says, I want you here, but I do not need you to be me. One that allows you to go inward when you need to, without punishment. One that holds your growth, even when it takes you in new directions. Love that honors freedom is not cold. It is not detached. It is trusting. It is a soft hand, not a tight grip. It is the ability to say, I choose you, not because I have to, but because I want to. There will always be moments where closeness feels overwhelming, where the lines between you and them blur, where the desire to please, to soothe, to stay connected, threatens to override your own voice. In those moments, pause. Return to yourself. Breathe. Ask, what do I need right now? What truth have I stopped speaking? Where have I left myself? And when you find the answer, speak it. Even if it shakes, even if it means disappointing someone you love. Because loving them at the cost of losing yourself is not sustainable. The relationship will not survive if one of you disappears inside it. Love is a bridge, not a cage. It is a space between two people, where both can bring their full selves, where individuality is not feared, but celebrated, where difference is not a threat, but an invitation. To love someone deeply is to witness their evolution, and to be allowed your own. It is to say, grow, change, follow what calls you. And if we can grow beside each other, beautiful. If we must grow apart, we will honor that too. Freedom in love is not about distance. It is about respect, about trusting that the other person will return, not because you demanded it, but because they want to. And fusion, the real kind, not the kind that erases you, happens when two whole people meet and choose to intertwine without losing their roots. It's a delicate balance, and most of us fall out of it from time to time. We get scared, we hold on too tightly, or we run too far. But love is not about getting it right all the time. It is about returning, coming back to each other and to yourself. If you have ever loved someone and lost yourself in the process, know this. It is not a failure. It is a lesson. And that lesson is not about becoming harder or more guarded. It is about becoming more you. You are allowed to crave connection. You are allowed to long for deep soul-level intimacy. And you are also allowed to protect your own inner world. You do not have to choose. The final paradox of love is not one to solve. It is one to hold. Like breath, like rhythm, like the tide. In, outside together, apart, again. So pause. Let this settle. You are not too much for wanting both love and space. You are not selfish for needing time alone. You are not unloving for choosing yourself. And when you find someone who understands this dance, who joins you in it, not to lead or follow, but to move with you. You will know. Because it won't feel like possession. It won't feel like fear. It will feel like freedom in fusion. And love, when it is real, always makes room for both.